I'm here to introduce Marni Shindleman. So one of the features that we had built into our website um, is we have a series of assignment ideas, and we had the great fortune of having people share different assignments with us. And Marni has shared an assignment and a unit for a class that she's teaching right now called Altering Space. And it has all of her lectures. It has all of her support materials. It has, extra videos, optional videos. It has her syllabus, the assignment, the reading. It has additional resources. So, one of the things that I really love about my friendship with Marni is that she's always been extremely generous with her expertise. And she's also someone who's really excited about teaching. So, one of the things that we were talking about in the last week is that, we don't have the kinds of opportunities that we need to talk about pedagogy and to really think about what our teaching means to our students and the ways in which we, the impact that the ways of which we teach have. And that's one of the opportunities that comes out of COVID, is it really puts us into a place where we really have to think carefully about the things that we're doing. And that's also important when we're talking about expanding the canon too, is that like I have slides, and those slides need to be updated. And this whole moment has really given us an opportunity to reevaluate how we teach and what we're looking at with our students. And with that, I don't want to take up too much more time. I'm going to pass it over to Marni Shindleman. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
I'm going to unmute myself and share my screen. This one. Sorry, it'll just take a minute. And I just hope my dog doesn't bark. Sorry if it happens. And let's see if we can play. Are we screen sharing? The big one? Did it work correct, Friar? Or do you sing my notes, everyone? All right. Hopefully all's good. Okay, so thank you so much. These are some of my dearest friends here that are running FotoFika, and new friends. Betsy's a new friend to me. Quarantine started for me right after I returned home from SPE, basically. And I've spent a lot of time, obviously, Ann Mastoni and I have spent many years together working on a book and being best friends. And Friar and I have also, and I have been so excited at what they have done in conjunction with Betsy. I remember your first post, Betsy, and the dialogue it opened. And I just come back every year after SPE, I do my survey. And my survey always says, I wish there were moments where we could, actually talk about pedagogy and things that would actually support my career at different times. So I've been an SBE member for 20 years plus. And so this is, and this has been the first time I've really seen these conversations. I've tried to do them at regional conferences for those in my regions when I've been all over regions. But really, I think we're at a precipice of a really radical pedagogical change that luckily and terrifyingly has happened because of COVID. And I think what's happening here at FotoFika has kind of been the lead. And the lead of what the future looks like. And to me, it looks like openness, sharing, and transparency. And also utilizing my privilege as a tenured white professor to those who can't speak, who don't have the time to share. I have the time this week to share because I have a lower course load. And also I provide situations and structure for my colleagues and my students to succeed. Anne said the other day when we were all talking, she's like, we've all been sharing with each other for years. We didn't invent any of this. And I think that we just need to make the circle wider. It's 100% true. I use some of Anne's assignments and we all switch around. So for this, I wanted to lay out for you an entire unit. My first 5 weeks of where I am in the semester, my first unit, I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit scary to share this with all of my closest friends. And to join in this dialogue. I should also say I'm really lucky to have amazing colleagues at UGA and also in the photo world, even if, as I kind of say, it feels like the orchestra on the Titanic. So you guys are seeing my big screen, right? Not my notes. I just am a little nervous about that. But so I'm teaching at University of Georgia. I'm gonna make you watch this because this is what it feels like. I believe we have one of the highest rates of COVID but we do not have any sort of reporting. Wednesdays are the hardest day on campus because they're the only day we get a weekly report for the prior week. So I'm just going to get this out of the way and say my university is failing me. My colleagues and my school of art is not, but the university at large, they're putting an entire town in danger. My parents live here, my friends, and they're doing a really embarrassingly terrible job of managing 40,000 students in what I often call a company town. It's much worse than what you're reading, and the details would mar this entire talk. I see some of my fellow University System of Georgia colleagues here. I don't pray, and I'm praying. And we are working, those of us who can are working really hard for change. I've seen amazing tenured faculty speak up, men, women, all people, to speak up for those that can't. So I only am going to talk about this for this firestorm because it's really awful, and I don't want this talk to become about this, but I also don't want to gloss over the real disregard that my institution has right now for the safety of my students, colleagues, and for this town. But for the next 20 minutes of this conversation, I'm going to spend my time talking about the reason we're all here together, which is our students. So this is my class for the semester, and I'm going to show all these techniques and things that I'm using in the class. You'll see some of them. And this is my upper level constructed image class. It's kind of our second semester majors. Our majors start their junior year. They do their core and then some core photo stuff. So, and I know I have taught at a liberal arts institute where I had 6, not photo majors, 6 art majors, and now I have 35 photo majors. And so I've taught at all sizes, but this is a really nice, it's a small class of 15. But I've used this structure in a lot of classes. In the spring, I taught a 100-person intro photo lab with breakouts. This spring, I taught book arts, which was a fully online class. And now I'm teaching what we're calling a hybrid or a high flex class here. And like I said before, I think I'm telling my students that there are some really amazing changes happening in teaching that happened because we were forced into this crisis point. And some things, what I'm seeing, I'm going to try to talk about some of the good things that I'm seeing and some of the things that could help all of us. So for this course, we are technically required to be face-to-face. Like I said, there's a company line and then a departmental line, which has been really supportive. So we were able, for various reasons and other things, not all of us are required face-to-face, and I think no one is. I'm in the building and it's pretty empty. So what I did was the first day split my students into 2 halves. So I have 7 and 8, or actually 7 and 7 really. And they're Power Rangers. I just use everything. Humor is my way to cope with everything. So my students, I think they're yellow and red Power Rangers. Can't even remember right now. They're really into being Power Rangers because it hit on their time period. And so I had them introduce themselves. It's the first thing. I use something I'll show later, and it's a resource called Padlet where they can upload instantly. You can do it while we're talking. There's all sorts of things. I use this in my large lecture classes and small classes. So everyone made intro videos, and they're hilarious. Some of them are students I've known for years. But what I did to start my semester was I reevaluated and I slimmed down my objectives. I think everyone's always like, oh, you seem so calm and cool. And it's because we can't have the same objectives we had. In the spring, I was teaching black and white. You cannot have the same course objectives. They're not going to learn darkroom printing in the last spring, and they aren't right now still. So, but I want my students first, I think, to make art. I want them to make during this. This is an amazing time to make. I want them to feel safe in my classroom. We've had a lot of discussions. I've been really transparent about, they ask me questions. I want them to learn some skills. It's really, they feel excited when they've learned something, and it kind of takes them away from the day-to-day. Have discussions about how they make, and this class has always been a point where my students learn to make more individualized work, but this is an exciting time for students to learn how do you make not in the classroom. And finally, I want them to make art still. So I'm going to take you just through the organization of this class, really to leave you the resources, to talk you through the resources. In a sense, this is basically what I do for my students. So I remember sharing a number of years ago at an SBE, we did a think tank. We did a couple of them. We did one at Penland, where it was a think tank weekend. And I've really been about sharing our pedagogy. And at one point in those, everyone ripped off the giant Post-it. We were using the large Post-it papers and wrote down their curriculums, their structure. And it was the first time I'd ever been able to see that, like, oh, VCU structures this way and Florida this way. And we were obviously the Southeast region. We were all looking at the structures of our classes, of our curriculum. And it was awesome to see that kind of sharing and to have it explained, as opposed to reading our crappy websites, which just say, take this, this, and this. for me to have a colleague explain and say, oh, we make this class go first and this class goes second. So that's what my wanting to share is born out of this, like, let's all share. And like I said, this has been used in all size classes. I'm also really lucky that my colleagues and I have all led each other into each other's online classes, which is a really exciting thing. I encourage you to do that. To let, like, for me, I sometimes let my graduate students, I'm like, come in and see the class, see it now virtually, but really come in and steal and look and, do all of that we can't really do right now. So it's great to be able to see. So I am working on the DTL platform. They're all equally bad. I've been at Blackboard at multiple institutions, but this is just what we have. That's kind of, I can complain all day about these platforms, but I just put that away and get working. So my number one thing is transparency, is really explaining to students how we work, what we do, and to really be in contact with them. So you'll see this is what our landing page looks like. I don't mess with the CSS. My type colleague, whose typographer does, I can't deal with it. But I constantly keep like a running tab of things. Sometimes they're just funny photo things. We had a change this week, critiques of like, and I always start off like, hey, my favorite team, or funny. This is nothing fun in here. There's often funny things on there. But also on the right, I import and export calendars. For probably 5 years now, I've given my students access to an iCal calendar for the class. I'm someone who learns differently, and I think all students learn differently. And so I've been forced to do this sometimes for my students with disabilities, and it became good practice for me, which is to make sure I repeat information twice. I think it's something really helpful. So my students have all of the schedule on the right. They can download it, link it to whichever phone platform they're on, or they can just check in here. And for me, it's just a way they know every time what's going on. So here's how my units are organized. And this is where you can, once you see this, then you can make sense of all the information that's kind of dumped on the website. So I split every group, every unit you can see on the left. I have my units, 3 more that I'm building out. One is the building space is almost done, but this is the basic structure of my class. It has 3 large units and 1 small unit at the end for the final. My units, I break it into assignments at the top because I need to be clear and consistent. And I found last semester, they would lose assignments if they weren't like in top, in bold. I use a lot of all caps. Then I always focus on a concept and a technique for each. That's always been my structure, but I very clearly do it here. So the first thing I'm going to show you is actually the assignment. And also, you should note that these are where my assignments and my students go. I'm really starting to think about things like, do I put it in a discussion topic or do I put it in an assignment box, which is what our structure is. An assignment box is private. It just goes to me. It would be like an exam, so they couldn't copy, and a discussion topic would be open. And so this week I was like, oh, they have to turn in contact sheets for me, contact sheets at different times. And those digital ones that come out of Lightroom. And I put those private because I want them to feel it's a really safe spot to show work that's kind of sometimes, risky. And then, but their final work, I want them to see all of each other's work, even if they're not seeing each other. So those are some things I kind of think about when looking at this. And here's the assignment. It's up there. For me, the assignment content is one thing. It can be altered and changed. But I wanted to point out a couple things I do in my assignments. And originally last year when we started talking FotoFika, I was really excited to talk about stuff, about some pedagogy and educational philosophies. I was lucky to be a fellow a number of years ago for an active learning, which is, the buzzword. So there was money for it. They invited certain faculty could apply, and I learned so much. I'd been teaching at that point for 17 years, and it changed the way I taught. So I'm going to show you, when I write assignments now, I follow, and my entire units follow what we kind of call, it's called BOPS. I've since come to find out, I believe it's Canadian. It's a Canadian educational theory on how to build assignments, and it changed the way I wrote assignments. So all of this is online. I'm going to go through it, and that's what I'm mainly in the next few minutes going to talk about. The first is really, they call it having a bridge. And it's basically a guide to having active learning. But what it became for me, because I'm like, studio classes are active. Like, we're very active, but it became about being transparent for the things I couldn't explain to my students. So in this, we're starting to get students, this class, this is the first assignment, and I'm pushing them away from just straight photographing. I'm like, just think of one thing, push one thing into it. And so I give them a bridge. So my bridge is really, I'm just straight up transparent. I'm like, thinking about constructing an image can be overwhelming to some of them. And that's what I write. Like, we're going to start by thinking, changing, or adding one thing in this. And then a couple of paragraphs later, I talk about, like, we work in different ways. And you may think that you should be able to sketch something out and that it works that way, but it's not how it works. So that's why you turn in contact sheets. So I write all of this into my assignments, and it has changed my students. The complaints of, like, why do I have to turn in 300 files? You know, has really changed because I just lay it out there when I write these. So you have kind of a bridge to open up. It's going to highlight the relevance of why this is important. And I think I am the hugest fan of ambiguous assignments, but I think we have to give them some sort of transparency within that of why you have to murk in this muck to make some work, to make really good stuff. So then I put the objectives. I listed as tasks often also. So they're very clear. These are your tasks you have to turn in. And I've just gotten more and more clear as I've learned this, but it made it really easy to switch to online. From there, we move into, it's really helpful. I had never thought and never liked to use words like, I'm going to pre-assess my students, but it's actually been a great thing. So I have all these ways. I either pre-assess or participate, learn together. So like the pre-assessment for this last unit was like, I'm doing some Lightroom stuff. I need to see where they've come from, what their past Lightroom experience is. So I give the lamest quiz ever. You know, it's like, where's your questions that you really have to know Lightroom, like, where's your .lrcat file? And I'm like, this isn't graded. Please fail this quiz, honestly. And they're like, I had no idea. I could only answer 2 of those questions. I was like, great. So you're going to listen to me tomorrow. You know, so, or this is one of the questions is like, what has happened here and how can you fix it? You know, it's just, you've lost your files. And it's just like, this is their 3rd time. They've had Lightroom in 2 classes, but catalogs are very difficult for all of us to understand if we don't code. So I do things like this, sometimes in a quiz format, which is my driest pre-assessment, but also quick and funny. They do it in 10 minutes in class, or in this case online. Or I can do a pre-assessment that's also participatory learning. So the first day of class, usually I had to give them 30 minutes to make 5 constructed photographs in or around the art building. So they have 30 minutes. I use this amazing thing called Padlet, which is free. I can't say how awesome it is. I use it in my large lectures. It's instant image upload. Ooh, I didn't black out one student's name here. Sorry, privacy. But Padlet is fantastic. So my first thing you saw was videos uploaded. I've linked this on the FotoFika page at the bottom. This is instant. In my large lectures, like sometimes I'll be like, everyone show me a photograph that lies, you know, and there's 70, 100 students and they all are live feeding. I mean, you pray that porn doesn't come up, but they've been really good so far. And they get excited. And so this is kind of a participatory way of getting them, assessing them and being like, well, what do you guys think constructed images are? And sometimes they make amazing work this first day. But then I wanted to talk, I showed you how my assignment is that, and I've also taken you a little bit through how the entire unit is built on this and just this level of transparency. We also, post-assessment and summary, I think, are things we automatically do in the arts. And I haven't had to think or focus as much on that. And I love all your guys' conversations on critiques. I'm learning as I enter my first critique next week for this class. So my class, like I said, this is the conceptual section that all of these links are online. I have a lecture I do, which is so embarrassing to send that out to you guys, where I joke with my students. I show TikToks. It's the, you know, I'm in the same outfits for all of them too, which is funny. I love the George Roos film, which is kind of accidentally online free. It used to be on Canopy and then it dropped off Canopy, and I emailed the director and he was like, oh, or not the director, the distribution company, like, we had no idea. And so it's accidentally online free this semester. A brief 3-minute, and then I have a reading. This is where I also put up, it says not for distribution. The readings from Anne's in my book, but there is an ebook available. I just didn't have time to pull those. But I also am really careful, and I started putting last year descriptions. So when we went online, I write descriptions of everything so my students know why. Again, it's going back to that transparency and that, like, why are you looking this? And what do I want you to think about? You know, so I'm like a Wes Anderson is a 3-minute film about color palettes. And I'm like, I want you to think about, like, if someone never mentions a location of a film, how can color tell us that? And so then they watch it with this kind of spin. The next we're doing flashlighting, off-camera flashlighting. I have a million tutorials. To start a really interesting tutorial dialogue with Betsy, John, Ann, and I about gendered tutorials. You know, I'm watching just we could use some great new tutorials in the world, but there are awesome tutorials. My students are using a book this semester just on lighting, but really it's just I explain to them, like in the tutorial, I'm like, go check this out, do this, you know. Then I also have optional moments. As you can see on here, the way the platform that DTL is, you actually can track, I can track all my students, and I tell them when it's not going to be tracked. So it says optional. So if my students properly learned how to use a flash last year, which they should have in their prior class, they don't need to watch that. And on here you can see it's kind of marked out. But that's another thing I do, is to make sure that I'm just tracking some things. You know, I'm tracking the things that are important. And then at the end, I can look at my class progress and be like, oh, you looked at 30% of the material. So here I have all the flash, and this assignment you could use for anything. You know, you don't have to have, if you're not at flash in lighting, or if you're in strobe or just natural lighting, you know, you can kind of mix and match the concepts and the techniques, but this is the one I've given you. And so finally, I want you guys to know we're in week 5, kind of between week 4 and 5. We started halfway through that the kids are okay. Like these are my contact sheets, some of them from last week, that are amazing. And so I forgot to actually say earlier, I let my students the option of coming in one day a week. And now we change things on the fly because that's what we can and should do right now. So I was finding I'd have like 1 student on Tuesday and 2 on Thursday coming in, and the rest it's all optional if they don't feel safe to come to campus. So I switched, and there were so many students that wanted to Zoom. I have Tuesday in live person and Thursday is Zoom. And I've talked to all except 2 of my students now have reached out to me to have moments to come in and talk about their work. And these are 2 of my students from last week. I was like, this is so exciting to see work, and being back in my classroom feels really good. It feels exciting to see work come about and to be like, they're okay. Like they're making the same, if not, and as good a work as they did in the classroom. And we're here kind of for them. And to really think that we have to kind of change our objectives and what I kind of call the firestorm, you know, and to really build a safe place for them to keep making work. So I have left up on FotoFika everything from this unit. This talk will be recorded if you need a walkthrough, but please feel free to use it. And in the spirit, really just keep sharing with everyone, and what everyone, keep sharing our syllabi in a really open way and open manner. So thank you. That is all I have today. I'm going to stop my share, even if we're teaching in the Titanic.